maybe give it one more minute and then we will get started. While we wait, I want to check my screen sharing and make sure you all are seeing the correct information. Okay. Great. Okay. I know that was maybe a short minute, but I am going to get started because we have a lot to cover. So this is the last of a three-part series on job searching for international students. We are talking this afternoon about communication and networking. We are going to be recording this session just so participants are aware of that. So we'll be sure to make that available to you as a participant if you'd like to refer back to it later. So if you have not joined us for the past one or two sessions, those will be available as well. My name is Jessica Bowers, and I'm manager for career development and coaching in the College of Engineering. And we also have with us Frank Oprandy, who is Director of Graduate Career Services in the Harvard College of Business. So what we're going, just a preview of what we're going to hit on today. We're going to start with the big picture. What's the role of communication and networking in the job search? Why is it important, and when does it happen? We're going to talk about where to network and present yourself to others. We are going to get a little bit tactile and talk about specific etiquette information regarding communication and networking, look at some sample ways of reaching out to professionals. And then we're going to close with actually thinking about your personal introduction, your elevator pitch, how you're presenting yourself in one-on-one interactions, and do some practicing together. So that's where we're headed. So last week, Frank talked to us about our job search strategy and some specific tools that you can use in developing that strategy and identifying companies and places where you want to apply. So I wanted to bring us back to that again, just as the big picture. And as we think about the role of networking and communication within this strategy. So the strategy, we're starting with ourselves, right? Of as a job seeker and an applicant, what are my desires, my wants and needs in looking for opportunities, and also that self-reflection of what is it that I offer, what is it I bring to the job market. We're also looking at assessing the job market overall, the industry areas you're interested in, the roles that are available, and the companies within that industry. We're paying attention to what are the streams where you're gathering information and interacting with others that might lead you to opportunities. So through different electronic or virtual platforms, through events and networking with individuals, as well as we're going to touch on as we go, what's the story that you're contributing to and sharing with others as you're progressing through your job search? What is it that you're presenting? How are you doing it, and with whom? So with all of that in mind, like I said, we want to think about what is the purpose or the role of networking in your job search. We use a couple different terms for networking kind of synonymously. Sometimes I call it building connections, networking. I know in the College of Business, you all refer to relationshipping. So any of those words that you want to use, I often prefer building connections. So why is this important? Why might you be doing it? What's the purpose? And when does it occur within your career trajectory, really? So as you can see here, there's several reasons, examples of why you might be building connections. And all of them would occur at different times, not just when you're at the job search stage. So, early on, you might be building connections with professionals in your field to help you assess your own interest, to learn about what job titles actually exist in the marketplace, what are those jobs, what do people in those jobs do on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, how did people get to them in terms of their career trajectory. It might help you to get to know what the needs are in the job market as you're learning and talking with professionals about what it is they do. What are the needs that they anticipate? What problems are they trying to solve? And what do they see coming down the line in the next 3 to 5 years? As you're getting to more of that job search stage, certainly building those connections can help you become more aware of opportunities specifically, or other people who you might need to be in touch with who can help you learn about opportunities related to your interests. And then really in the long term, building connections and networking with others is just, it's a lifelong approach of, being in relationship with other colleagues, and having that a mutually beneficial relationship where you can share knowledge and support one another. So the purpose is multi-purpose, and it's occurring not just at one given time, but kind of all the time. And if it's not something you've started yet, then start now and plan to do it pretty continuously. We'll talk as we go here about how to go about that. So with that, we want to think about the rules of networking, I might call them, and in terms of your mindset when you're approaching building connections with others. So the first is to think long term. It's never going to go that successfully trying to build connections with other people if it's evident that you have an immediate outcome that you're looking for, right? Like no one likes to be contacted for you to just get something from them when you don't have that relationship yet. So think about networking in the long term. I'm building relationships to learn from people, to get to know them, to offer them to share my knowledge. And over time, it's going to be mutually beneficial. I'm not looking for an immediate outcome from them from the get-go. Number 2, the more that you give, the more that you'll get. And you may be in a position right now where you're wondering, well, what do I have to give? I'm a student. I haven't been in the industry, for many years. What am I offering? So what you give may be not a substantial amount, but still just thinking from the mindset of how can I offer something when connecting with others. And maybe that's something that you learned about in a class. Maybe that's an article that you read that you can share with the person you spoke with because it seems related to their interest in something that you talked about. What you give can be small, but it's approaching the relationship from that standpoint of I'm here to offer something and not just to get something. And then finally, quality over quantity. So I want to be building relationships, building connections with other professionals who I can have, again, relationship over time with them and have good conversations, learn a lot from one another. Well, I probably can't do that with tons and tons of people. So if I can reach out and have some really solid conversations over the phone, over virtual platforms, in meetings at conferences, with a handful of people, 3 to 5 people, then those quality connections are going to multiply over time and help my network much more so than if I'm sending, 200 LinkedIn connections, but not having a lot of depth in those. So quality over quantity. So where to network? So these are some examples, right, of places where you might engage with others and begin to build or strengthen connections. Those may be on a virtual platform like LinkedIn that's specifically intended for networking, or it may be in interactions in places where you are already working with people, right, in a part-time job, in an internship, on a team. And so you're building connections just by doing that, or by asking the people you work with, oh, hey, do you know anyone who works in this area? Could you connect them with? Or, it may be in places where you're meeting someone for the first time, an employer-sponsored event, reaching out to an Auburn alum. So lots of different places to network. I'm actually going to attach in the chat box for you a networking guide that can also help you to brainstorm who you might reach out to, places to network, people to network with who might already be kind of in your circle in some way, shape, or form. And it's just thinking broadly about who those people are and what the next step would be. So let's see. So I just uploaded that networking plan guide for you to access in the chat box, and encourage you to download that and go back to it after our session today. So keep in mind, as you are thinking about reaching out to people, building connections, that when you reach out to someone, they're going to want to get a sense of who is this person who's reaching out to me, and they want to look you up, right? And see, how are you presenting yourself? What are you interested in? Where are you at in life? So we would refer to that as your personal brand, or maybe your digital identity, because the places that they're going to find that information are usually digital platforms, right? These platforms, LinkedIn, Handshake, Twitter, and of course they're going to be the way that you're presenting yourself through your email correspondence, and how you've formulated that, or if they've met you at an event, virtual or in person, those interactions are going to contribute as well. But keep especially in mind these virtual platforms that are maybe social or professional networking tools. Of course, things like LinkedIn and Handshake are particularly intended for professional networking. But be mindful that, if someone's just searching to see who you are, then they might look on Facebook too, or that might come up in their search. So just be mindful that those are places that you are comfortable with the content that you have on those networks, and that it would be appropriate for a professional contact to look at as well. So we're going to switch gears now and talk specifically about some communication etiquette, both in terms of reaching out to people to set up a conversation, or maybe to follow up on a previous interaction. So oftentimes, especially now, this is going to occur by email. And so just here are some initial tips to think about in terms of how you're going to formulate a email message to someone that you either maybe loosely know or don't know yet at all. And so some things to do and some things not to do. And we're going to look at an example here in a moment. Related to that, in the follow-up portion of your communication specifically, it's in particular, following up is just important, right? You want to be continually connecting and continuing the conversation that you started with someone, so it wasn't just a one-time thing. But you want to be mindful of kind of the etiquette of how to do that, right? So especially with employers, so following up one time, that keeping in mind what is an appropriate time to wait before following up. And if you're not hearing back after your follow-up message, not to just keep going, right? So just stopping after the second follow-up. And then you can always reach out to your career coach in engineering or in business, or if you're in another college, reaching out to your career coach there or in the university career center. So let's look at some specific examples. If you will, I'd love for you to give me some thoughts here as we look at these samples. If you'll turn your video on and speak up, or you could put it in the chat box. But tell me, when you read this sample outreach message, what stands out to you here? So the subject line is not great. It just says available, ? Not very specific. What else stands out?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so my name is Andrea. For me, what stands out at the first glance is the bold, bold title. And I think there is also a different font between the paragraphs, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's one of the things that stands out first to me as well, the different font types and the bold text and the spacing. So just the lack of consistency in the formatting and font would be a bit of a red flag. So yeah, those are both great thoughts about this message. A couple other things that I think about here are this person is attaching documents, a cover letter and a resume. They are mentioning the page number in the research project, which seems unnecessary. That's yeah, that's a good point too. It also seems unclear like what they're asking for, right? They've given a little bit of an introduction of themselves and what their areas of interest are, but then they say, please let me know if you would be interested in talking with me, and here are my documents for reference, cover letter and resume. So the person that they're reaching out to, it's kind of like, I'm not sure what you're asking for. What would you like to discuss, or what would you like to learn from our conversation? So there's several things about this message that it sounds like we've all noticed that are maybe not best practices for an outreach message. So we're going to take a look at another one, and I want you to point out to me what seems different about this, what you notice in this example. So there is a proper introduction with reasons for the email, right? So the subject line is more specific. We saw the one before that just said available question mark. This one says fellow Auburn alum in industrial engineering. And we see in the second paragraph the specific ask of would you be willing to speak with me by phone, over Zoom, or another video conference platform? And they've, in the first paragraph, indicated why they would like to speak with the person that they're reaching out to. I'm reaching out because, and insert reason. I would appreciate the opportunity to learn more about 2 or 3 things that they're referencing. Anything else that stands out here? The other thing that I specifically like to point out about this is that it's going to include some suggested availability time and the time zone. I actually recently had someone reach out to me wanting to schedule a call like this, and I was glad to speak with this person, but they left it up to me to find a time to meet with them, which they were trying to be respectful of my availability, which I appreciated, but it actually was a little bit more burden to have to like look across the whole calendar and find times when I was available and make those suggestions than if they had said, would you be available on these, here's 3 options, specific days and times. And then I could just check my calendar and say yes, no, or nope, here's another suggestion. So I like to point that out specifically. Also here in at the bottom when signing, there's a war eagle. If you're reaching out to an Auburn alumni, it's always good, and they've done that here in the subject in the signature to really capitalize on that commonality. And maybe it's something else different from 2 Auburn alums that might interact, and maybe there's a different commonality, but trying to draw upon what you have in common with someone. Okay, so then we are going to take a look at a thank you note, a follow-up for you've reached out to someone, they've agreed to meet with you or chat with you, you had that interaction. So now you want to follow up with them and thank them for their time. What do you notice about this communication?
For me, first the subject also. Thank you for your time. I don't know if it doesn't look too appropriate to say that. And if the person writing this sounds very familiar, like you're talking to maybe your friend or something, it's not really appropriate to talk to um, somebody from a company like that. I guess. Yeah. He said it was so nice to meet you. I mean, it's still polite, but I don't know if we would have formulated differently. And and here he says, it seems like an amazing place to work. It's still, I don't know. It's, yeah, it looks so familiar, like you're talking maybe to somebody that you already know for me. Yeah.
I I like those comments, and in the chat box we have maybe the overall tone is too casual for talking just once. So I think you're both hitting on something here that's important to be aware of tone and level of familiarity with someone based on how many times you've interacted. So there may be some room here for both Andrea, or Andrea, I'm sorry, pointed out the subject line. Maybe it could be a little bit more specific than thank you for your time, but not too off base there probably. And then within the message itself, you know, there is an element of, you know, gauging what that interaction was like, and if you seem to develop a rapport with that person, a familiarity and comfortability, even after one time of talking. But I do think it's you want to see, especially between that first outreach message that's more formal, you're introducing yourself, you've never met them before, and when you're reaching out again to thank them, you do want there to be a little bit more comfortability and rapport there, because yeah, now you know each other to some extent, and you want to come across as more personable. So I think it's okay to be, it is okay to be more casual in that follow-up than you were in the initial outreach, as long as you're not getting too casual, or you know, if it were to say something like, hey, great talking with you, let's chat again soon, or that would be too far casual on the spectrum. So overall, you want more casual in the thank you follow-up, because you want an element of personability, and a relationship has developed. But you do have to be careful to judge the interaction that you had with them, and tailor your message accordingly to the rapport that you built in that meeting. Okay, a little bit more on etiquette and following up. So let's talk about some specific time frames for following up in different situations. So let's say you attend a career fair. We had an engineering and technology career fair a few weeks ago. College of Business had a career fair recently, I believe last week. So I suggest 24 to 48 hours after a career fair, or a career type event like a fair, to go ahead and reach out to a recruiter that you spoke with and thank them for their time at the fair. It was probably a pretty brief interaction, but I think it helps to, it helps you stand out, that you are taking the time to thank them for spending their time recruiting at Auburn. So there's a sample of that on this slide at the top, letting them know, you know, it's a pleasure meeting you. Thank you for coming to the fair and taking time to speak with me about your company. Here's a specific component of the conversation that I enjoyed, or something I was really interested to learn about. So specifying and tailoring it to the conversation that you had, and then letting them know, hey, I'm taking the next steps for applying to your company or to look into these roles, whatever they described in your conversation as your next steps that you need to move towards. So after submitting a job application, a follow-up time frame might be about 1 to 2 weeks after sending in that resume. And being mindful too of, did the job posting indicate a specific time frame for when they would begin reviewing applications? After an interview, you want to follow up really soon after that, within hours, or at least within the next 24 hours, to make sure that you're quickly on their mind again after having that interview experience. So another sample here of a thank you after an interview. A couple of things I'll point out about this and related to your comments on the tone of the other thank you email. There is a little bit more of a casual tone in this email as well after an interview. And again, always assessing the in-person experience and like, what was the rapport like between you and the interviewer? But since you've met, you hopefully did develop some rapport and got to know each other a little bit. The message can be a little bit more casual. Again, still staying professional. Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed learning about fill in the blank at this company and the goals and mission of what you're working towards. I'd really like to contribute to this team, and so forth. You can see in the example. This example is also taking a moment to follow up on something that you referenced in the conversation. So it's offering something to be helpful. Here's the information that we discussed earlier. Let me know if you have any questions about it. There at the end, the PS, enjoy your upcoming vacation to New Orleans. The food at Manning's is incredible. That's another place where you can see, oh, that was a little more casual. But what it shows is you have a common interest with this person. You were listening carefully to what they were talking about, both on professional and personal topics. And at the end of the day, you're trying to convey to the employer, yes, I have the skill set that you're looking for. I can do the work and the job. And you know that from what you've seen in my materials, my qualifications, but I'm also trying to convey to you, I'm someone you would enjoy spending time with. I'm a personable person. Employers want to hire people that they would want to spend time with on a day-to-day basis. So you're looking for that balance there of professional but personable. Before I move on, I want to stop here to see if there's any questions on this part, because next we're going to jump into our personal introductions and elevator pitches. Questions or comments at this point? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. So we've talked about the overall role of networking and communication in your job search. We've talked about specific places and platforms to network and how you're presenting yourself. how that's inherently a component of networking, is the way that you're presenting yourself. And then talk through some kind of tactile approaches to how you're crafting your messaging for reaching out, for following up, for sending thank yous. Now we're going to spend some time on how you're presenting yourself, how you're offering an introduction when you're in conversations with people. And that they could translate to emails as well, but thinking about interactions that you're having talking to people, whether that be in a more formal setting like a career fair or an interview, or a less formal setting like a virtual chat or an in-person coffee chat, or if you're flying on an airplane. Even though some of those more in-person interactions may not be happening quite as much now, they're still happening to some extent, and they will to a greater extent in the future. So we'll think about these experiences both in the in-person and virtual settings. So we're going to think about two types of introductions or pitches. The first is a traditional elevator pitch. So it's that 30-second to 1 minute introduction of who you are, and starting the conversation with someone in a way that just shares a little bit of information about you, but as it is relevant to the person that you're speaking with. The next type of pitch that we'll discuss in a moment is how you can concisely and confidently answer some questions that you might encounter as a job seeker who is not native to the US. So you can see here, starting with the traditional elevator pitch, the components that you want to include in that. So your name, what you're studying or your program, your year or stage in that program when you're expecting to graduate, a little bit about your interest areas, or sometimes I ask that differently of like, what gives you energy or what motivates you most? And again, thinking about what you might include there based on what's most relevant to the person you're speaking with. Including information about something you have past experience with, be it an actual paid work experience, a project that you've worked on, research that you've been involved in, any type of experience, and thinking about how that's relevant to the contact you're speaking with. And then kind of closing up your pitch with, what is it that you're interested in most immediately? What are your goals? What are you moving towards in your next step? You're working on networking, you're looking for an internship opportunity, and the time frame of that. Or what is your ask of the person that you're speaking with? And this part is all especially going to vary depending on the situation or scenario, who you're talking to, and if it's that more formal or less formal environment. And then finally, having a sentence to kind of close up this introduction and lead to the rest of the conversation. So that might be something like, so I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. I'm excited to hear more about the opportunities available with Intercon services. Again, varies depending on the situation, who you're speaking with, what's most relevant. So what I'd like you to do right now, I'm going to attach in the chat box an elevator pitch guide for you with some of this type of information. So go ahead and open that up as a guide. And then I want you to take a few minutes to jot down some bullet points of what would you include, what's the content you would include in your elevator pitch. And because it varies so much based on the scenario, let's just all say, oh, I just realized I didn't share that with everyone. I only shared it with one of you. Let me do that again. Here we go. Now I put it in the chat box to everyone. So let's say for everyone's purposes that you're preparing an elevator pitch for a 30-minute phone call or virtual chat with an Auburn alum. So not necessarily a recruiter with a company or an interview, but just a networking call with another professional contact who's working in your industry area. So take a couple of minutes now to jot down some bullet points of what you would discuss in your pitch. Once you've done that, if you'll turn your camera on, so I'll know that you're finished. Take another moment to jot your thoughts in those bullet points of the content that you want to include in an introduction. And then it's really important that we practice saying these introductions out loud in a low risk environment like what we're in now, before you're in an instance where, you know, you need to give an introduction to a professional contact that you're reaching out to. So we're going to take some time to do that. All right, I'm gonna put you in some breakout rooms so that you can practice with a partner. Don't let me lose you here. You can, like I said, practice in a low risk way with a peer, with a friend now, and then we are going to come back together and chat just a little bit more about some unique elevator pitches.
When I went to my room, there was nobody there.
Okay, I think we have everyone back with us. Is anybody willing to share how your practice pitch went with your partner or your group? You can speak up or share it in the chat. Well, I hope that the opportunity to practice with a peer or classmate was helpful, even if your words were stumbling and you were just doing it for the first time. This is the time to do that and to think through and practice how the words are going to come out before you're in a place where you'd be sharing your introduction with other professional contacts. So I want to be mindful of our time together. I'm going to share a little bit about another type of elevator pitch. And this is also on the second page of the elevator pitch guide that I shared with you in the chat box. So as an international student, you may find that you get some of these questions, right? Things like, do you need sponsorship? Are you eligible to work in the United States? Or maybe statements like, well, I'm not sure that our company sponsors. Has anyone gotten those kinds of questions or statements before in interactions you've had? So maybe not. If you haven't yet, then that may be a good thing, or you might get this kind of question in the future. I don't know that they're inherently bad questions, but sometimes they can throw you off a little bit just in terms of how do I respond in a way that's not a yes or no answer and kind of closes the conversation, but in a way that can keep your conversation with an employer going, especially if you're at a recruitment event, at a career fair, or even in a more informal one-on-one conversation. So like I mentioned, the elevator pitch guide I shared gives some specific suggestions about how you might respond to some of these questions. For instance, and I'm not going to go through each of them now due to our time frame, but I'll start with the first one. If you were to be at a recruitment event and a company representative asked you, well, do you need sponsorship? If you were to respond, well, yes, in the future I might, again, that's more of a yes or no answer that may or may not allow the conversation to continue as much as you'd like. So I'm going to suggest a different approach to responding, and you'll find this suggestion on your page 2 of your elevator pitch guide. So if I respond instead like, well, I am eligible to work in the United States for a period of 1 to 3 years, and with some additional paperwork, I can continue to be of service to your company. As a global student, I'm excited to share my skills in software engineering and data analytics, and look forward to the opportunity to work with you all. that sounds a lot different than if I respond, well, yes, I may in the future, because I sound more confident in the way that I'm representing myself, and I'm focusing on the skill set that I bring. I'm describing myself as a global student, which the term global, I think, translates well to the professional and the corporate world in general, because organizations often think of themselves as global companies. They're in a global marketplace. So you can hear the difference there in my responses. Like I said, I want you to refer to the suggested responses in your guide as you think about how you may encounter these kinds of questions in the future, and you want to practice how you're going to respond in that confident and concise manner. So with that, I'm going to point you to a few resources just to refer back to from the three-part series that we've had going on the last few weeks. Of course, this evening I shared, or this afternoon, I shared the networking guide and the elevator pitch guide. If you're an engineering student, I encourage you to follow up with our career coaching team in the Office of Career Development and Corporate Relations. If you're in the College of Business, certainly follow up with your career coaching team through the Graduate Career Services Office or OPCD for undergraduates. If you're not part of either engineering or business, make sure to reach out to the University Career Center or to the office associated with your college. And finally, make sure that you're staying in communication and aware of the resources in the Office of International Student and Scholar Services and the great team of advisors there who are so integral to a big component of your job search and your work authorization processes. And then finally, US Visa Pro. If you're in our first workshop, you are familiar with Monique Meadows, and that she is a local immigration attorney who can be a resource to you as well. So with that, I want to thank you for attending this afternoon. I'll stay on for a moment if you want to ask questions, but also wanted to go ahead and close this out to be respectful of the time allotment for today. So thanks for coming.
There is one question in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Does an international student make a worse impression compared to a global student is the question. That's a good question. I don't want to say that international student, the term itself, makes a bad impression. But I think there are companies that might immediately, if they're not very familiar with the process of hiring someone who does not already have work authorization in the US, that they might shy away from, well, what do I need to do? What's going to be involved in that? And so that could be more of an immediate association for that recruiter or employer if they hear you say international student. And whereas, like I said, I think the term global student could have a little bit of a different connotation in terms of how they immediately react to, well, what is it going to take for me to be able to employ this person? Let me know if you have a follow-up question on that. Great. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all again for being here this afternoon, and I'll be following up with our participants by email to share where you can find the recording if you want to refer back to this session.